The world continues to be ridiculous. This is Take Your Medicine. I'm Jacob.
And I am Sadie. And we have quite a few ridiculous things to talk about today.
I think this is going to be an exceedingly silly episode because you haven't seen one of the stories that I have yet. And
That's fair.
I cannot wait to get to it. But the first thing that we want to do is play...
Guess where that headline is going?
All right. So should I pull up this headline then?
Yes.
All right.
So this is in the Post-Millennial, and the headline reads, Family of Fallen Marine Suing Alec Baldwin. Now, Jacob, before we continue, please guess where you think that headline is going.
All right. Let me think. Well, obviously, you could immediately go to the race card. I don't know how that would fit into the Alec Baldwin case. I don't know what the race of the fallen marine that's being referred to is.
Right.
So I'm thinking something racial, but also... if they're suing Alec Baldwin, I think I've heard something about defamation happening around this case. I don't know the specifics of it.
Yeah, you're warm.
But so I think if it centers around defamation or something of that nature, I think Alec Baldwin is just going to say something along the lines of, "Well, I'm an entertainer, and my opinions aren't fact anyway. They're not real."
You're like lukewarm, I would say.
All right. So
let's go ahead and get into this article. Actually, if you want to just go to the URL, because I started taking clips from it, and it was so short, and all of it was important that I'm like, I'm just probably going to read the whole thing.
Okay, so here's the URL.
Here's the first paragraph. It says, the family of one of the 13 fallen Marines killed in a terrorist attack during the disastrous U.S. withdrawal from Afghanistan is suing actor Alec Baldwin after he accused them of being a January 6th insurrectionists on Instagram.
Okay, so this is what...
So you said defamation, so you were right, but you didn't know why, right?
Okay,
so the family of Lance Corporal Riley McCollum said in the lawsuit that Baldwin's comments on social media, quote, were false, outrageous, defamatory, irresponsible, vindictive, and caused and continue to cause plaintiffs severe emotional distress, end quote.
Okay.
So follow so far, yeah?
Yeah. So Alec Baldwin said that he accused who? Accused the soldier of being at January 6th? Or
he
accused all of the 13?
He accused the family. No. He accused the family of the fallen one. So it explains it more.
Oh, I see. Okay.
So after that attack happened, Baldwin sent $5,000 to McCollum's pregnant widow to help with the expenses of the couple's soon-to-be born child, which is pretty nice. Like, that was a nice thing to do. And it wasn't a political... I mean, maybe it was political, but it wasn't a partisan move. It was just, you're a pregnant woman who lost her husband, you know, here's some money.
So Alec Baldwin did that.
Alec Baldwin did that of his own volition.
Interesting. Okay. Pretty nice gesture for a murderer.
Right. I mean, that was probably before he was a murderer, but yeah. So according to court documents, Baldwin sent the check to McCollum's sister, whose last name is Royce, and requested that she pass it on to her brother's widow. I don't know how to say that name. Gina, I think, is how you say it. It's spelled in an interesting way.
Yeah, that is a weird spelling. Jiennah. Yeah. Interesting.
So then this year, on January 3rd, Royce posted a picture of herself at the Washington Monument on Instagram that was taken on January 6th of last year. I think that's supposed to say the same day the riot occurred at the U.S. Capitol.
Okay.
According to court documents, Royce did not participate in any unlawful events that occurred that day. So she was just there because you're allowed to be there.
So the issue is Alec Baldwin was calling them insurrectionists directly, even though this person was not engaged in any unlawful behavior.
And this is the Marine's sister.
Okay.
So she was there, and that was after her brother had died.
I see.
Right?
Okay.
No, that's wrong. She was there on January 6th.
And then the Afghanistan withdrawal happened later.
But then she posted this year about being there last year.
So one member of the family went to the protest, was not involved in the riot, and Alec Baldwin used that as the basis to call the whole family insurrectionists.
Yes. It gets better.
Okay.
And by better, I mean worse.
Okay.
Because you said defamatory. Oh, it's so bad. But we know that Alec Baldwin is not exactly a shining star of culture and society.
He's not.
It goes on. Baldwin got wind of Royce's photo and exchanged, quote, defamatory words with her over direct messages on Instagram, accusing her of being a, quote, rioter. He then decided to post her photo on his personal Instagram page and wrote in the caption that Royce was a, quote, insurrectionist. Baldwin has since deleted the post. Cowardly.
Oh, wow.
So then this goes on to quote the messages that they had sent back and forth, and this is the really juicy part.
All right.
She kept the receipts, ladies and gentlemen.
Yep,
She kept the receipts.
Always keep your receipts when you're dealing in memes.
True. So Alec Baldwin messaged her saying, "When I sent the money for your late brother, out of real respect for his service to this country, I didn't know you were a January 6th rioter." Royce responded, quote, "Protesting is perfectly legal in the country, and I've already had my sit down with the FBI. Thanks. Have a nice day." This is like something that I would say. So
wow.
Awesome. And then he goes on and says, "I don't think so. Your activities resulted in the unlawful destruction of government property, the death of a law enforcement officer, verifiably false, an assault on the certification of the presidential election. I reposted your photo. Good luck." Which is a really sassy thing to say.
Yeah.
To somebody that you were trying to help, but...
Yeah, I mean, again, this is like, I think it just speaks to his character that he's donating money and then he just goes around and attacks that same person. It's like, even if the person you give money to ends up not being a great person themselves, you're not giving the money, like if I were to donate money to somebody, right, it would be because I think it would very much help them.
Yes.
It wouldn't be because I think that they're a phenomenal person or that they're particularly deserving other than their circumstances call for it, And so if you're going to be that kind of philanthropist and give away money, you have to make the assumption that sometimes when you give away money, the person that's going to receive it is not going to be ideologically aligned with you.
Right.
They may not be a great person themselves.
They may not even use the money for what you had gifted it to them for.
Right, exactly.
But also, he's accusing the Marine's sister of all this stuff. She didn't benefit from the money in any way that we know of.
Right.
Because the money was supposed to go towards helping with the baby. Right. That's not her baby. It's her sister-in-law's baby.
I guess the point is, like, if you're going to give money to these people, like, just leave it at that. Give the money. If you want your public shout out, whatever, like, you probably shouldn't be doing that either. But then, like, set it aside. There's no need. Like, he just looks petty now.
Well,
he
is petty.
Well, he is petty, but it's like how it tarnishes your goodwill gesture, something that would have made you more appealing in the eyes of conservatives. Say, oh, well, Alec Baldwin, maybe he's not such a bad guy. But then to go around and then just engage in this pettiness when you're a millionaire famous actor against nobodies.
Well, and the really funny part too is that he's already dealing with these murder allegations.
Well, that was before.
Right, but this just happened.
Oh, I see.
This month.
Oh, I see.
So you already are under fire for some other way more horrible thing, and then you go out of your way to cause more problems for yourself.
Well, is he trying to maybe muddy the waters a bit for his criminal trial then?
This isn't that muddy, though. I mean...
Well, if he's just trying to be... I don't know. Maybe he's trying to establish a pattern that he has anger issues. I don't know. Like, maybe he's just a broken person. Maybe he just...
I think that's probably right. I think, so...
Maybe we're trying to read logic into a situation that isn't necessarily logical.
So there are court documents that basically say that Royce wasn't part of the riot part. It says that she became entrapped in the crowd due to the area being locked down.
Oh, okay.
And then... It also says during the rioting, she was stuck in place outside the Capitol building next to multiple police officers for hours, just because it was locked down and she couldn't get through the crowd, basically. So, and then the cherry on top, Baldwin has not issued a public statement in regards to the lawsuit.
Yeah, I think that's pretty much, that's standard, though. If you have a lawsuit going on, you typically don't need to say anything, which is why, not to bring this to his case of killing that woman, Helena Hutchinson or whatever, but he went on social media and, like, said all these things after her death and, like, dude, shut up.
Well, and then he just posted another video recently that was like, I'm working with the police. We're doing everything we can. We really need to find answers to this. And it's like, you mean locking your ass behind bars? That's the only answer. He's like talking like somebody else is going to be held responsible for the actions that he committed. And it's like, you are so out of touch with reality. And then to also go and do this during all of that.
Right.
You live in a different world. And I'm really happy that the family is suing him because I think they have a good case right now. One, because it is defamatory, but two, he's already in deep shit.
Yeah.
So just the compounding lawsuits, I think, and investigations, I think was a smart move.
Yeah, it's defamation is really hard to win in the United States, so we'll see what happens. I mean, I don't think that this family would engage in a lawsuit if they didn't think they had a reasonable chance of winning. So we'll see what happens.
It could just end up being a settlement too, like a settled civil lawsuit, which good for them. They can get a couple million out of him, I guess.
Well, I don't know. But maybe. We'll see. It's hard, It's like...
It is hard.
Defamation, even the defamation, like the really famous one, like the Nick Sandman case.
That one was hard
But that was a settlement.
Yeah.
That didn't even make it through the whole court proceeding,
but
the
he's
whole justice
very
process.
Wealthy now.
Right. But, we don't know what the settlement was. You can assume that was probably a lot, though, because CNN agreed to settle, right, to make the problem go away.
Right.
So, but even in that case where he has pretty much a slam dunk case, even in that case, it was a settlement because, it's a risk for both parties. It's very hard to prove in court.
Mm-hmm.
And if you prove it in court, I think you traditionally get more damages than you would otherwise get from a settlement. So it's like a compromise.
It's more of a game of just pressuring whoever you're suing enough that they give you the amount of money that you want. Because maybe your intention is you want to settle no matter what, but you want to see how much you can squeeze out of them first.
Yeah.
Like, you got to make them nervous, right? Like, oh crap, this might actually go to court. So it's like, how much do you want? How much do you want?
Right.
We'll just make it go away. So I think something like that might happen with this, but
we'll see.
Screw Alec Baldwin. You're a disgusting piece of shit.
Yeah, he is. I don't know how anyone in his position can be so petty. That always boggles my mind. You're a famous actor. You're a household name. You're worth millions of dollars. And you engage in petty bullshit with random people on Instagram. Like, what are you doing?
I mean, she's not super random in his world, but still, it's like, why is your radar on that?
Right. I do not. It boggles my mind.
He went out of his way to repost her photo and call her out and be like, get her. Like, why? Don't you have enough on your hands, with murder and all?
That's so funny.
It's just
I don't know
stupid.
Why.
It's stupid.
I can't.
This is just proof that celebrities are nobodies and losers, and we shouldn't care about them at all.
Yeah. I mean, they're... you want good actors when you want to enjoy a movie, and that's all they're good for. They're not...
It's a job.
Right.
You're not like a god. You're not...
They're not political experts. They're not social experts.
No.
They can't be any of those things because they live in such an extremely isolated bubble.
Well, they live in an isolated bubble of make-believe.
Right.
Because they're literally playing pretend for a living.
Right.
Their brains get turned into weird mush because they lose their own personalities if they're good at their job.
Yeah, there's that. They all live in the same geographic area. They're all part of the same income bracket. They're all part of the same social circles. And then they come and go after normal people, or they come and lecture us about random political topics. It's like, you are the least qualified person to talk about any of this. Somebody that's working class, blue collar, has more to say about political issues than you ever will.
Right.
More of value to say, I should say.
Right.
So it's just like, if you're a good actor, good. I want my movies to be entertaining, but I don't want you involved in the broader society.
They live in a Twilight Zone version of reality that is just not accurate. So I don't like Mr. Baldwin.
Yes.
He's not a good person, I don't think.
I have another doozy of a story to talk about. This one is actually this one was actually shared with me by my friend. So I'm gonna pull this up on the screen.
Okay.
So this is, get this privacy banner out of here. This is, this article says, it's from The Guardian, right?
Okay.
The Guardian says, calls for redesign of royal honor over offensive image. And then the subheader says, petition says image of St. Michael standing on Satan is reminiscent of the George Floyd killing. And this... Oh, no. And this is the image.
Why? Because Satan's dark skin? Is that literally why?
It's literally Satan, and he's got wings. I think, and he's like a snake, right? He's like a green snake, and St. Michael's standing on Satan. And they say that's reminiscent of the George Floyd killing.
Wait, what is the royal honor? Is that a British crest?
It's a UK crest thing. Okay. Yeah.
So now Bible images are offensive.
Yeah, it's...
And who made the jump that George Floyd is Satan?
Well, that's the problem, right? These people are so racist that they look at a painting of a biblical scene or biblical characters, and they immediately assume that the dark-skinned one that looks like a serpent that is being stood on by an angel is the black man. They automatically make that connection.
But also, in the case of George Floyd, you could make that argument. I'm not making that argument, but somebody could say, because he was a career criminal, so you could make the claim that he was satanic or whatever, but I don't think that. I don't think his history of criminality has anything to do with his soul or his religious beliefs, but what? I would never look at that and go, you know what this reminds me of?
Yeah.
I can't breathe.
This reminds me of white people killing black people all the time. It's like, what are you talking about?
It's really
no
funny.
one in their right mind makes that connection. But
you just said the key part. They're not in their right minds.
That's true. They're insane.
Yes.
They're insane.
They're eating themselves.
So this part of this article says campaigners are calling for the redesign of one of Britain's highest honors, personally bestowed by the Queen, because they say the badge resembles a depiction of a white angel standing on the neck of a chained black man.
But also, this is in the UK.
Yeah.
George Floyd was an American citizen who died on American soil. And the race problems that we have in America are distinctly and uniquely American.
Yes. The race problems, to the extent that we have race problems that are real and not made up. Were we talking about this
last week?
How it was like an export of the United States, all this radical left-wing garbage?
And like all the wokeness poisons other Western nations.
Yeah.
And the UK is like, isn't it like 70% white or something like that?
No, it's like over 90%
is
white.
It?
Yeah.
So why do you, not to be crass, but why do you care about a dead black man from America?
Right.
In a predominantly white nation?
In a country that has a very different history with race issues than the UK.
You mean the US?
No, the United States. Black man died in the United States, which has a very different racial history
I see
than
what
the
you
UK.
meant. Yeah,
it makes sense to me. I'm not saying that I agree with it, but it makes sense to me why people would get upset about this particular killing in the context of the United States.
Right,
I think
can
it's
understand
overblown, but
Yeah.
I can understand how somebody could get to that point.
Yeah.
I don't understand how someone living in the UK could liken that to somehow the history of the UK. It's more logical to say that the UK is like, oh, we're much better than the United States. They split off from us and then they ran and did a bunch of shit that we didn't like. But we're the UK. We're pure.
And look how much they ruined racial relations in their own nation.
Right, exactly.
Exactly. They could play it that way, but instead they decide to eat the same poison as us. And it's like, what are you doing?
Right.
Why? And there was something else I was going to say. Now I can't remember what it is.
Well, we'll read this next section if you think of it. So this section here says, a petition calling for the medal to be redesigned has attracted more than 2,000 signatures. So,
I remember what I was going to say, but go ahead.
Admittedly, this 2,000 signatures is not a lot.
No.
It's a fun article, but it is refreshing to know that it didn't get... 2,000 signatures on a change.org petition is not a lot.
For a country of a few million.
Yeah.
And you're trying to change like a national crest.
Yeah.
Like that's 2,000 is a drop in the bucket.
It's just a fun article because it's so ridiculous. Yeah. But what were you going to say? You remember?
So it almost seems every time you hear ridiculous things like this, like a picture of St. Michael stepping on Satan is reminiscent of George Floyd. It's almost like these people are like trigger happy almost and like want to jump the gun, and
they're triggered happy
and they're on the offensive. Get it? Because every time they see something, they want to make it a problem before anybody else does, just to be like, oh, you can't do that, you can't say that.
Oh yeah,
they're like the censor police, I guess, or like the offensive police. Like they just want to make sure that they say it first before anybody else can.
Okay, yeah.
Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, they want to claim that banner of moral virtue before they want to be the ones to recognize the injustice and call it out first, because that makes them a hero.
Well, and I can say this from experience of going to a university where indoctrination was basically a main goal of all of the all of the bodies of the institution, is they want to train you to see things that should be offensive to other people. Does that make sense? So they take their white students, because it's a mostly white campus, predominantly white campus. and they tell their white students, look out for these things, spot them, speak them out, like make sure other people know they exist. And you have to do it on behalf of the minority groups. Like they train you to see these things and become offensive for people that you have no business being offended on behalf of. Yeah. And so it goes with the virtue thing. People see it. They want to say it first because it makes them feel good, but they've also been trained to do it. And it's like, how about you just shut your trap? Because if a black person's not upset about this, you don't need to be upset about this for a black person.
But it's like, I mean, this gets brought up all the time. It's like they are projecting their view of black people onto something totally unrelated. They are starting with the assumption that black people are inferior and therefore need the white man's help.
Yes.
And it's like, and the left wing acknowledges this to some extent. They have this term white savior. Like,
but they don't understand it within the context of their own ideology.
Right. Yeah. So it's like they have the white savior, which they use to criticize basically the entire foundation of Western civilization.
Christianity mostly. Yeah.
But then when they try to do things like this, like calling out a cherished national treasure, essentially, they don't realize that they are being white saviors on behalf of somebody that they are assuming is inferior. It's like, these people are so backwards.
White liberals are the most racist people on the planet.
I agree with that statement. They are.
Like, hands down, point blank.
Yeah.
Full stop. They are. You cannot convince me otherwise.
Yeah.
They will try to argue all day long that they're just allies and trying to look out for somebody, but it's like, name one black person in your life that asked you to do that for them.
Right.
They didn't. Right. You're a white savior and you're a racist.
And isn't that infantilizing too, to say it that is. And it goes, like we were talking about voter ID. I don't remember if we talked about that on a podcast, but it's like the assumption that black people are unable to attain a voter ID for some reason is the height of liberal, like, oh, I'm looking down my nose at the black people because they're inferior. It's like,
yes,
anybody of sound mind, black, white, Asian, whatever, has no problem getting an ID whatsoever.
You don't even have to be that intelligent to do it.
Right.
Like,
yeah, dumb white people can get an ID.
Some of the most rednecky, trailer parky, do not know how to write their own name can go get a license. Yeah. And no offense to those people. You are probably a productive member of society, but it's not difficult to do.
But that's a great example. It's like, if somebody like a white person that's a trailer park, not particularly educated or smart, can get an ID, what the white liberals are saying that voter ID is racist is that most black people are dumber than that. That's what they're saying.
Which is so offensive.
I know.
That's the most offensive thing you can say. And every time things like this come up, I think about my one friend that is very dear to me. She is black. She's an accountant. She's a very smart lady. And she probably will never listen to this because unfortunately she is very into the woke ideology thing and like the anti-racism crap. But sometimes I will like ask her poking questions about like the Black Lives Matter organization, and she's like, well, I don't know that they're really the best, kind of a thing. But every time stuff like this comes up, I'm like, I feel bad for her that everyone is infantilizing her and trying to make life easier because apparently she's not smart enough to figure it out on her own. Like, I just think about how that would make me feel if I was in her shoes, but I don't think she sees it like that.
Okay.
Because I don't know that she can come out of the wokeness.
Yeah.
I don't know, but I'm like, if anybody went up to her and told her that it might be difficult for her to get an ID, she'd be like, what are you talking about? Yeah. I just don't understand how it doesn't add. Like, I don't think it adds up in her mind, and I don't know how it doesn't.
Well, the problem is that this is not a movement like anti-racism. It's not an ideology that has any utility.
Right. It doesn't.
The only purpose is to make people feel morally sound, morally superior for no reason.
Yeah.
Like, if you can just echo the words Black Lives Matter, and that makes you feel like a good person, you basically have attained, quote unquote, morality with no effort.
Yeah.
If you can just chant a slogan because some people are underprivileged, and by saying it and being an ally, you're a better person for it. Well, some people who don't want to put a lot of effort into actually making their lives better will go ahead and latch onto those ideologies because they're easy. Yeah. They're like cheat sheets for morality. Not really, because that's not a real morality, but in their mind it is, right?
Well, we talked about this before too. It's like, you can say that, but nobody wants to talk about why these problems exist. Like, yes, Black Lives Matter, of course, they're lives, they're human beings with their own consciousness, but You don't talk about the fatherlessness. You don't talk about the higher rate of abortions. You don't talk about the rate of black on black crime. You don't talk about the rate of drug use in black communities. You don't talk about the amount of illegally acquired firearms in black communities that result in a lot of black on black deaths.
Mm-hmm.
We're not allowed to talk about these underlying problems that are causing black people to die, which is why the movement started.
Yeah.
Because they just want to blame it on white people when most of the time it has not had anything to do with us. They want to blame it on the systems that have been in place forever and ever and ever without proposing new systems,
right,
without trying to incentivize the family, without trying to bring police back into the neighborhoods and really be tough on crime in these places.
Right.
They don't want to do that. Nobody wants to talk about those problems. Nobody wants to talk about those solutions.
Right.
They just want to be morally virtuous and say a quick slogan and call it a freaking day.
Yeah, and I think, and this is what's corrosive about a left-wing sort of worldview, is that there's not emphasis put on individuals as much as community, right? Mm-hmm. The black community is a great example of it. It's not what should individual black people be doing, right? Mm-hmm. It's not how should their communities be policed, how should they handle their young men that are violent and out of control, right, to the extent that they are. It's not the case in every community, right, but it's like that. There's no emphasis on personal responsibility. Look, if my neighborhood was overrun with white gangs, I'd be like, ratchet up the police presence,
yep,
get their asses off the street, lock them away for a while. I don't want this in my community.
Well, and that's the problem, right? Is that a lot of people who've lived in these black communities for generations do want the police to come back, but nobody is listening to these people.
Right, and the DAs of these places, yes, are giving these, like, sometimes violent criminals, like, a slap on the wrist, yes, a couple $100 bail, and then off on their way they go to commit another crime.
Right, it's so ridiculous, and it's like, if you actually want to do something to help these communities, let the people of the community tell you what they want to see happen.
Right.
If it's a black community, white people don't need to be involved. We just don't. We don't live there. We don't work there. We don't have family there. We have no stake in it. We have no stake in the matter, no dog in the fight. Ask basically the elders of that community who have lived there for 50 plus years what they want to see happen with their young people, with their policing.
Right.
Don't talk to the young people. The young people don't know shit. They're
right,
stupid and they want to get off easy, and they would always vote for less policing. Talk to the older people.
And a lot of even the minority, like Black Lives Matter people, are students that are in college.
Exactly.
They're already at the top of society, relatively speaking.
Right.
They're getting a college education. They're in a college town, surrounded by their peers. They're insulated from basically all the worries of the world.
Well, it's
an
echo chamber, too.
Right.
Of
And
bad ideas.
they're the loudest proponents of Black Lives Matter, of policies that are making a lot of communities more dangerous.
Yes.
And it's just, it's a whole mess. They're not basing it on anything real. Right.
But until people start proposing solutions, it's never going to change. And again, it'd be white saviorism for white people to go in and propose solutions, but the white people on the right who do propose solutions tend to value Black lives more than anybody else.
Yeah,
which is interesting, I think.
Not to go on a tangent here, but I think that there is a solution that involves the right to a great extent. And I think, so one thing that I've been saying, and I don't know if I said it on the podcast before, but one thing that I've been saying is the Black Lives Matter central argument, if to the extent that they actually have an argument, is that the police are tyrannizing black communities, that they are unfairly targeting young black men, arresting them, putting them in jail for sentences or for crimes that really shouldn't be jail-worthy crimes, like smoking weed or whatever, right? That's the argument. So their argument is that the government is tyrannizing their communities. Well, the entire conservative case for the Second Amendment and the Bill of Rights more generally is that there are guards against government tyranny, specifically the Second Amendment. And so I think there's room here for the Black Lives Matter people to embrace the Second Amendment. Their argument is police are tyrannizing the community. So I think a solution is get yourself guns, arm your communities. If you have a black community, push for your community to be armed. Go as a group.
Because those gangs have firearms illegally obtained. So you should also have them.
Go as a group, take your community, your church, whatever. get your guns, go to the range, learn how to use them, buy AR-15s, buy pistols, carry them when
Take
legal.
your concealed carry classes together, make it a community thing.
Protect yourselves. And yeah, there still might be police in your community, but guess what? The police are going to act differently when they know there's a very high chance that the car that they stop is going to have a gun in it. That doesn't mean you have to use your gun. It just, that's going to be in the back of their mind when they are engaged in these interactions, right?
Well, and what's the average police response rate? Like 7 minutes or something?
Oh, I don't know.
That?
Yeah.
I mean, I think it also just depends on where you live and state of defunding the police. But if it's an average of 7 minutes in a regularly funded police area, that's too long.
Right.
7 minutes is plenty of time for you to be dead and have nobody helping you.
Right.
So that's another reason to arm yourself.
Yeah, it's just like you have that hedge against the government. You make the police officers the agents of the state a little bit more hesitant. You actually have a tool to protect yourself because black people are the primary victims of black violence.
Yes.
That's like the gang violence that's happening in Chicago. It's not white people being carjacked. I mean, sometimes that happens, but it's black people getting their stuff stolen and being shot and being all this stuff. So protect yourself from the bad people in your community. Protect yourself from the state. And if you want to convey a larger message and it's legal in your state, strap your AR to your shoulder and march to the state capitol.
Yeah.
I would love to see a whole contingent of black Americans with their AR-15s going to their state capitol to redress of grievances, right?
Yeah.
That would be a beautiful sight. Well, yeah.
Publicly, but yeah.
I'm saying if it's legal to open carry in your state. Because that happened in Michigan.
Yeah.
It was white people that did it in Michigan a year or two ago. But, if it's legal, take your guns to the Capitol, display them, show the government that you're going to protect yourself against the government and against the criminals in your community.
And also show them that if they are trying to make firearm ownership illegal, it's going to be very difficult for them to make that happen because you're already armed to the teeth.
Right. And guess what? Now the right has an argument if the black community is heavily armed and gun control comes down, racist.
Exactly.
You can't repeal gun laws. They're racist.
Exactly. Well, and I don't know if people in the black community are against guns as a whole.
So.
I don't think so, but I don't think it's pushed for home defense much. I think the exposure is just, well, gangs have guns,
right? But
good people don't.
Well,
but I think it needs to be a push for like home defense and self-defense.
Right. Well, the problem is like if you look in an area like Chicago, like they have really strict gun laws, so it's really an onerous process for a normal person to get a gun.
Right.
So it's like,
which is why it's associated with gangs. Gun ownership means you're in a gang.
Right. Exactly. So it's like I think and the government again, that's the government tyrannizing a community, preventing you from defending yourself, also leaving you defenseless against an overbearing government.
It's unconstitutional. But we could have a whole podcast about how every gun law is unconstitutional. But
did you want to talk about this story now?
So more ridiculousness. I mean, it's ridiculous in a way, and I'll explain. Okay. So this comes from CNN, written by Amarachi Ori, I think. Okay. Not sure how to say that. And the headline reads, the creator of the viral black fetus image, black is capitalized, by the way, for our listeners, black fetus image will have his illustrations published in a book. Okay. Which people get illustrations published in books all the time.
Right. So why is this significant?
So this is significant because, like I said, the illustration of a black fetus in the womb went viral last December, with many people commenting on social media that it was the first time they had seen a depiction of a dark-skinned fetus or pregnant woman. Now, let me pause. Can you ever remember a time where you saw an infographic or just a clip art of a black pregnant woman?
I can't actually.
No?
No, not... Well, I mean, I didn't study any biology or anatomy in college.
Well, I'm not saying in an anatomical way, just like on the internet, like you've never seen a black woman pregnant.
Yeah, I mean, I've seen that, but not like a medical illustration. I don't think I've ever seen that, actually.
Well, it wasn't saying that. It was just saying that nobody had ever seen a depiction of a dark-skinned fetus or pregnant woman.
I see.
So it's tricky, right?
Right.
The wording is tricky.
Right, okay.
We've seen lots of dark-skinned pregnant women. There are millions in this world.
Yes.
Right? Maybe not a fetus because they're inside.
Yeah, I haven't.
So you don't see them until they're outside.
I haven't seen a real fetus ever.
Right. And I hope you don't.
Yeah,
ever,
I hope I don't.
Until they're a fully formed person.
Until they're not a fetus anymore.
Right. Exactly. So, I made that super tiny. Hold on. So it goes on to say the attention came as a surprise to, I don't know how to say his name.
Yeah.
Chidi Bera Iba, I think.
Okay.
The Nigerian first-year medical student who created the image and describes it as, quote, just one of my drawings to advocate for diversity in medical illustrations, which on its face is probably helpful because if you're trying to diagnose things, it's going to be different on different people in different skin tones and also in different races, right? Because our DNA is different. And then it goes on to say the image started a discussion about a lack of representation in these illustrations. Images that are mostly found in textbooks and scientific journals to show medical pathologies and procedures. Again, that makes sense because if you're trying to diagnose something on a black person, it's going to probably look different than on a white person, just by nature of pigmentation and
there's
and
that,
things.
and there's diseases that only affect black people primarily, like sickle cell anemia.
Exactly.
I don't know what complications, if any, that has for pregnancy. I imagine it comes with some complications, but
it's a genetic disorder, so mom can pass it on to baby.
Right, but I mean the actual mechanics of birth.
Oh, I don't know.
If that causes issues.
I imagine.
I would imagine too.
Yeah,
I don't know anything.
And then there's a few more kind of fluff paragraphs, and then it says studies have shown this lack of diversity. Again, the ethereal studies.
Right.
A 2014 study by researchers at the University of Wollongong in Australia examined gender bias in anatomy textbooks and found that more than 6,000 images with an identifiable sex published between 2008 and 2013 in 17 textbooks. Huh?
So it's 6,000 images across 17 textbooks.
Yes.
That's not a lot of textbooks.
No, but I don't think there's many.
That's true.
Because they're all the same. But so the identifiable sex images, the vast majority of them were white and just over a third were female. And about 3% showed disabled bodies and 2% featured elderly people. Why don't we say elderly bodies? Yeah. We say disabled bodies, but elderly people.
Disabled bodies is so dehumanizing.
Yes.
That's disgusting. That makes me feel like gross to say that.
I read that and I was like, are you talking about like a corpse? Like, what do you mean body?
Or just somebody with like their legs don't work or they have paraplegia. Like, I think disabled people, I think of somebody in a wheelchair. What am I supposed to call that person? A disabled body? Well, you're nothing more than a body than a corpse.
Yeah, but when I hear bodies like plural, I just think like soulless and dead.
Oh, yeah.
Like like, hey, agent or detective, where's the body? Like, it's somebody already deceased.
Ew.
It's just icky. I'm like, why can't you just say a disabled people?
Yeah, I don't like that.
Is anybody who's disabled want to be called a disabled body and not a disabled person?
Right.
You're completely taking the personhood out of it. Anyway, so this... Again, I understand the need for it for diagnostic purposes, but I just wanted to put this in there to point out that Iba, who earned a chemistry degree in Nigeria, is now studying medicine in Ukraine, a predominantly white nation, right?
Yeah.
So only he began his medical illustrations in 2020. He has already created images depicting anatomy and a range of conditions such as the skin disorder vitiligo, cold sores, and chest infection, and spinal injuries, all in black people. Okay. Again, if there's no reference for that, that's an important thing to have published, right?
Right.
And then, so this...
Is this where it gets spicy?
This gets spicy.
Okay.
So he's calling the book Mind the Gap a clinical handbook of signs and symptoms in black and brown skin. Okay. Again, nothing wrong with that, except the Mind the Gap part. I don't think that's really important. But so it was first published in 2020, co-authored by Malone Mukwende, don't know, a medical student in London. And Malone wrote over email that... Iba's work unearths some of the biases that exist in medicine in plain sight that we may not be aware of. Representation in healthcare is imperative to ensure that we do not allow implicit biases to cultivate in our heads. Now, before you comment,
okay,
I wrote a note here to myself because I wanted to remember what I was going to say.
Okay.
Implicit bias is being cultivated against healthcare for white people. if that's what you're talking about. You're talking about implicit biases because you want it to be Black people that medical doctors think of first.
Yeah, I guess so.
Like, that's basically what they're saying. So I said, if this Nigerian medical student plans to practice in Nigeria, it makes sense to publish a reference guide like this.
Right.
And talk about needing to see Black bodies in a journal or in a textbook.
Right.
If he plans to practice in Ukraine, the population is at least 80% white.
It's much higher
if
than that.
not higher.
It's over 95%.
I couldn't find the actual statistic because Eastern European nations don't think about race that way.
Right.
They go by ethnicity. So it was like Romanian, Bulgarian, Ukrainian, stuff like that.
Right. But when we're thinking about like people of African descent,
right,
there's no country like the United States.
Right.
There's none. I mean, except for the African nations.
So I just put 80 just to be generous because they did say that there are sometimes blacker looking Ukrainians just because of where they're positioned in
like
Europe,
Asia,
because there's Turkeys right there too. And so I just put 80 just to be on the safe side because I couldn't find a race breakdown because they just don't care like we do. And I just think if he's planning on studying in Ukraine, this is important because you're still going to see Black people, but you're still going to interact with primarily white people.
Yeah. And I just don't, I guess I understand like the need to cover conditions that might only affect people with darker skin.
Yes.
Like I understand making an appropriate illustration for that. And I also understand that if you're going to be the author of a book, then you can draw your models however you want. If you want to draw your anatomical models to be black-skinned representing, then that's fine. But I think that same courtesy should be extended to the authors of the current medical textbooks, who I'm sure all of them are white.
Exactly.
They probably don't think, oh, I need to be racially inclusive and draw a Black person with their chest cut open so we can see all their organs.
Yeah.
They're probably just thinking, I just need to draw a representation of a person. And so they just,
because organs are organs, right?
Right. So, and it's like, it's not like the information that you're getting from a drawing of a white anatomy illustration is going to be different somehow than the Black version of that same illustration.
Right.
It's just a difference of color. And so I guess beyond the specific diagnoses for vitiligo and things of that nature, I don't understand the utility of making it diverse other than making yourself feel better. Again, it's the same thing. It's just a moral virtue signaling, you know?
Well, it gets better.
Oh, no.
So then we start to get into the real of it, right? So we've acknowledged the utility of having Black anatomy reference guides.
Right.
For obvious reasons.
Yes.
Sorry. But we know that that's not what's happening.
Right.
Right? We can take a guess.
We're already getting there.
Iva says that a lack of illustrations of skin conditions in Black skin makes it hard for medical students to diagnose them. Okay. McQuenda hopes that together they can create, quote, the blueprint for the world, end quote, in terms of what diverse medical textbooks should look like, and that Mind the Gap will be known as the go-to textbook for representation of a variety of skin tones. But by variety of skin tones, he means brown and black.
Variety of shades
of brown and black.
Yeah.
So that's not really a variety of skin tones because you're not talking about Asians. You're not talking about white people.
Right.
You're talking about just brown people.
And again, which is fine. If this is going to be published or even if it's published in the United States and you're the author of it, I understand that. But pushing to make all medical textbooks like this, isn't that a little bit excessive?
Yeah. And I said, I wrote another note to myself, predicting there will not be a single white graphic in the whole book, because there are a ton of other reference materials that show diagrams of white people in medical scenarios. But this statement is disingenuous on purpose.
Right. Yeah. So, yeah,
there
you can
doesn't
basically
need to be
assume...
a white person in it, but you don't actually want a variety of skin tones. You want just brown and black. And that's fine, but say that.
Right.
Like, this is a reference material for just dealing with African descent people or whatever.
And that would make sense. Like if you just want to say, look, rashes, for instance, are hard to diagnose when the skin is darker. You can include a textbook with all kinds of different shades of brown skin and say, here's what that same rash looks like in each of these scenarios.
Right.
That would be useful.
Right.
That would be useful. But you could compile that into a book separately without being on a crusade to change the whole medical textbook industry, I guess, right?
Yes. And then the very, very cherry on top that tells us that this is not just meant to be utilitarian. He is quoted as saying, "I want it to be a norm that whenever a person searches online for a particular skin condition, a particular health challenge, that the first pop-ups are Black illustrations or are illustrations of people of color."
There it is.
So again, if you want it to be that if you search a condition followed by a skin tone or a race, the appropriate image comes up, that makes sense because you're trying to see what you need to tell your doctor you're experiencing, right?
Right.
But if I'm a white person looking up something, seeing it on Black skin is not going to be helpful to me.
Right.
Just as it's not helpful for a Black person to look at it on a white person.
Right. And it's not going to be helpful, especially in the situation of like Ukraine, where the vast majority of people have white skin.
Exactly. They're going to be like, why am I seeing this?
Right.
That's not helpful.
I can't identify this rash on me because the first images and reference materials are all people with skin that don't look like mine. Now, that I can understand. I can empathize with that, how that situation would be difficult for a Black person trying to diagnose there. But I also am calling into question the difficulty of like going on Google Images and saying X and Y condition, Black skin.
Well, we could look it up right now.
You would see it, I'm sure.
Do you want to do that?
I mean, yeah, just do it as a thought experiment here. Just
Eczema,
see what you see.
Black skin. Images.
I'm assuming
Eczema on Black skin. Oh, look at that.
Wow.
Tons of pictures. Can I see how many?
So their problem essentially boils down to the fact that when you're in a majority white nation, when you Google search a medical condition, you have to add the extra Black qualifier onto it. That's the crux of now.
If that's the problem, then just make it 50-50.
Right,
Google should be making it like a 50-50.
It shouldn't be 50-50. It should be what is most likely. I mean, Google knows what your racial demographics are anyway, so maybe Google can tailor it to you. But in a majority white country, you would expect white skin to come up first. For African nations, I would expect Google to work differently. If you search for eczema from Africa, I would expect Black skin to show up there, you know?
I looked up eczema Asian skin.
Yeah.
That popped up
too.
So
I think it's just a problem of demographics. Like these people are being educated as medical professionals in majority white countries.
Right.
Of course the culture is going to be different.
Right.
You know, it's like this is such a non-issue. These people are inventing issues.
Which is why this is so ridiculous. It's like if you want to publish a reference guide for Black skin and Black people anatomy, just do that. Why do you have to make a big song and dance about it?
Right. Again, it's the moral virtue signaling.
Is. And this statement that he makes, this last statement, is basically trying to erase white people, which in the nation that he is living and working is the majority of people. So it's like you voluntarily went to a white nation and now you're trying to like erase the fact that you're in a white nation. It's just like it doesn't make any sense.
Yeah. It's imagine how racist we would be called if we went and studied medicine in Nigeria and then demanded that all the local textbooks there showed white people. That would be like, ridiculous.
Get out of here, whitey. They'd be like, what are you talking about? I think they call, like, a lot of African nations call white people ghosts. So they'd be like, get out of here, ghost. Because they've never seen, like, a lot of people have never seen white people. Yeah. So they're like, what is it, a ghost? They're so pasty.
But it's like, there are just certain realities to dealing with a culture and its ethnic makeup. The United States is more diverse than most nations, but still majority white. And so don't be surprised when a lot of the imagery around medicine and whatever else is white people. That's just because that's what almost everyone you see is going to be white.
Exactly.
Almost everyone. The majority of people you see on the street are going to be white. And that's just the reality.
I know.
There's no moral statement in there. There's nothing deeper to read into it. That's just how it is.
It's just so ridiculous. And even from the headline too, it's like, he's going to have his illustrations published in a book. It's like, well, that's kind of what you do with illustrations. I don't know. The whole thing just from top to bottom was ridiculous. And you know, you want to give him the benefit of the doubt and make it, you know, say that he has the best of intentions, but in his statements, you can just tell that it's just a tirade. I mean, it's nothing else.
Yeah, I can give him the benefit of the doubt if he just wanted to, like we said, publish a reference book. Like, that sounds perfectly appropriate. But then to go further and say, I want every image, the first image people see to be Black skin. That's, first of all, that's not useful to the majority of people like we've already discussed. And second of all, that just shows that you're motivated by more than just filling a gap in the medical knowledge.
Exactly.
So it's, anyway.
Let's move on.
We'll talk about something else ridiculous.
Yeah.
So
the trend continues.
Let's rant about fact checkers for a bit.
Again?
Yeah.
They're back in the chat.
Well, their fact checkers are running wild.
Oh, no.
So this is from This is from Reuters Fact Check. And this says, Despite repeated misinformation being shared online about the Great Reset, this sustainability plan proposed by the World Economic Forum is not a secret plot to end private property or create a totalitarian state. And then they say, read more here. Of course, I didn't read more because this tweet is nothing but pure propaganda.
I love that they went out of their way to specifically counter the things that people are saying about the World Economic Forum.
Right, but here's that it's still not even a counter because
no, it's not.
because
they don't say it's not true. They say it's not a secret.
well, that's true. But number one, the plan that they're planning hasn't happened yet. They're
2030, right?
No, they're fact-checking something that has not happened. How can you say with certainty in a fact check that their plan is not to end private property? You don't know how their plan is going to be implemented. You don't know what effects it's going to have on society. You're literally fact-check predicting the future. That's ridiculous.
Fact check true.
Fact check true. But also...
fact check, I'm a time traveler, fact check.
But here's the thing. If their Great Reset plan ended private property for 80% of people, this fact check would still be accurate.
True.
Because they say, "Oh, it's not it's not a secret plan to end private property. No, we're just going to take it away from 80% of people."
I would say it's higher than that because if they're going to just have private property to the billionaires of the world, that's what
I'm saying.
A fraction of a percentage.
Well, the wealthiest people get to keep their private property. Exactly. If the rest of us lose our private property, it's a fact check true. It didn't end private property.
It's more like 99%.
Yeah. But that's not the point. The point
no, I know. I'm just saying 80% was a little too lenient, I think.
But the point is, if somebody in the world still owns private property, then this fact check is accurate. Even if all the rest of them lose it. And then it says, or create a totalitarian state. Well, if they start, adopting quarantines as a normal pandemic procedure, that's totalitarian.
Yep.
Right? If they start saying you can't have cars anymore because of their carbon footprint, that's totalitarian. Yep. Okay,
if you have to start checking in with daddy government every 15 minutes, right. That's totalitarian. Show me your papers, comrade. That's totalitarian. So
right. Censor it, fact-checking content so that it can't appear on social media. That's totalitarian.
Shadow banning people. That's totalitarian. It's like...
So it's like, I don't understand in what world a bunch of billionaires getting together to restructure the world economy. I don't understand in what world that can't be authoritarian.
Well, in this latest rendition of the World Economic Forum, Xi Jinping was also there. So now it's not just the billionaires. It's also, I'm sure Xi Jinping is a billionaire, but it's not just the billionaires. It's also world leaders
it's
now.
Also actual overt authoritarians.
Right, exactly. So that should raise a lot of flags for people, and it should be terrifying that billionaires are colluding with actual world leaders.
Yeah.
Right? It's not a conspiracy that they're colluding. They are literally meeting to say, this is what we want to do. And this didn't even deny it. That they met and planned things. So
right.
Fact check, they're colluding. That's true. That is true. Collusion, the word collusion doesn't necessarily mean negative, but it has a negative connotation. And in this case, it's negative.
Yeah. So it's just the fact checks continue to be absolutely ridiculous.
Did you read the link?
No, of course I didn't. Because here's the deal, right? If you read a fact check that you can just see and logically say, well, their fact check is just pure propaganda.
Yeah.
Why would I be a dumbass if I went on to read their article? I guess I could read it to find more criticisms of it, but it's like once you read this tweet, you should know that whatever they're going to say on this topic is total garbage.
I didn't know if maybe they had linked the actual proposed plan of the World Economic Forum.
It doesn't matter. I don't want I almost said barbarians. Well, that's almost
true.
I don't want billionaires from the top down controlling the economy at all. That is, I do not care how many billions of dollars you have. I do not care how smart you are. That is a non-starter. It's a non-sequitur. I'm not listening to you if you propose a plan for restructuring the world economy. Yeah. That is a task no human, no matter how smart, can do. It's just...
Yeah, it's very arrogant.
This is why we have markets, because markets are more than the sum of their parts. When you have all these brains manipulating the market and filling gaps and providing services and goods where they don't exist, you get natural shifts in the market. The market will automatically fill the holes and the needs of whatever issues we're encountering currently. And to inject yourself at the top and to try to exert top-down control is exactly how you get things like famines, like the communists did. They communized all the farms and then famines, because you can't manage a complex system from the top down. A complex system has to be managed from the bottom up. That's just how it has to work. Otherwise, you're going to screw something up drastically.
Yeah, that's true. Because there's so many things that will slip through the cracks if you go top down.
Right. And think about the bureaucracy, right? Like, okay, so maybe you could have a top-down structure where somebody at the very ground level sees a problem and they go, oh, this problem needs to be fixed. In a free market situation, they could just implement that fix in the market. They see a gap in some necessary product, and so they start producing it. In a top-down controlled economy style, they have to see a problem, bring it up to their superior. They bring it up to their superior.
Yeah.
And it has to go up the chain to somebody that can actually make the decision to fix the issue.
Yeah.
Well, we all know in that case, anyone that has worked in any organization whatsoever knows that once it goes past like one level, it just gets lost into the ether. Like it never goes anywhere.
Gets fixed. It never gets corrected.
Right.
Yeah. Instead of giving people the free will to do whatever.
So yeah, and something as complex as the monetary system, you cannot control that from the top down. It can't be done.
No.
It cannot be done.
No.
It's not possible. So don't even freaking try. Oh my goodness.
Well, do you want to talk about another fact check?
Yeah, where's this
thing?
one?
About COVID.
The conspiracy theorists are right again?
Yeah.
All right.
What we call colloquially conspiracy theorists.
Yeah.
Because as we know, most people labeled that are not actually conspiracy theorists.
Yep.
So this is in Stat News, which is basically like a medical journal website, and all they do is talk about medicine and biology and data.
Oh, fun.
I know, it's super interesting. But for this, it's useful. And the headline reads, new data show those who recovered from COVID-19 were less likely than the vaccinated to get infected during Delta wave.
Imagine that. Wow, natural immunity works better than a synthetic therapy?
Yeah.
Wow.
And also, I kind of just want to point out that they don't actually use the phrase natural immunity anywhere in this article.
They say recovered from prior infection.
They do, and then they also say something about like the strength of having recovered from COVID or something like that. And I'm like, you mean immunity?
Because they don't want to admit that the people who are harping on natural immunity being a thing,
I know,
they can't use the same words, because then they have to invent a new phraseology so that they can pretend that they discovered it.
It's all propaganda.
They came to the realization that everyone knew.
Because we're just going to pretend like natural immunity hasn't existed for millions of years.
Who am I going to bet on? The evolved natural immunity that's exceedingly complex to the extent that we barely understand it? Or Pfizer telling me that their synthetic substance will work,
and then coming back and saying that it actually doesn't.
Right. Like, what am I going to trust?
So this article starts off by saying, new data, which I did click on the data because I wanted to see what it said. New data released Wednesday, so that would have been a few days ago, showed that both vaccination and prior infection offered strong protection, protection, not immunity, against infection and hospitalization from COVID-19 during the Delta wave, which we are now past, but data takes a long time to acquire.
Yep.
And also that case and hospitalization rates were actually lower among people who had recovered from COVID-19 than among those who had been vaccinated. And that I believe that was if they had only been vaccinated and never had COVID.
Now, is this recovered from any variant of COVID, or is this recovered from the Delta variant specifically?
So
I guess you can't tell, right?
They can't tell. They did it by a range of dates, which we'll get into. So this is the citation if anybody watching is interested in looking it up. And if you can't get to that link anymore, that's because the CDC is shady as shit.
Yes.
But I just wanted to put that up so that anybody could pause and look it up later. Cool. So then we go on to the next paragraph of this. The data released by the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention and health agencies in California and New York are sure to inflame arguments from those who insist they don't need to be vaccinated if they can show they've recovered from COVID-19. So there's your little bit of propaganda there.
Yep.
But the data contain many caveats that health officials stressed pointed to the value of vaccination, even on top of prior infection.
All right, let me put on my logical hat. What are the caveats? Well, the caveats are they're studying people that have already recovered from COVID. So they're going to use that to say, well, if you recover from COVID, then yes, it's stronger. But of the people who never had COVID, and then you look at the difference between unvaccinated and vaccinated, they're gonna parse out that data, right? So that's gonna be their caveat. They're gonna say, well, yeah, it's stronger after you get infected, but before you get infected, vaccines are better, which makes logical sense. But yeah, that's exactly what they're gonna do, isn't it?
Please pull up the figure then, because You nailed it. So the big spiky line is unvaccinated, no previous COVID-19 diagnosis.
Okay.
So that was people who had been hospitalized in California May 30th to November 13th.
Okay.
So that line is anybody who was hospitalized with COVID, had never had COVID before, had never been vaccinated.
And this line is basically like a mountain, like it spikes up. What's the unit on the left-hand side there?
So the unit is per 100,000 cases.
Oh, hazard rate per 100,000 cases. Okay, so
Yes.
this solid line spikes up to 16 around mid-August.
I think it's actually 17. It's not, I think I cut it off. So it spikes up to 17, and that's the hazard, but it's not, I don't believe it's the rate of actual hospitalization. Like,
yeah, I would have to know what...
1.7 million were not hospitalized at that time in California alone.
Right.
I want to say.
But the hazard rate is probably hospitalizations, I would think.
Yes, so that's hospitalizations. So
per 100,000.
So each like 2 is 200,000.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it spikes like mid-August, like you said. So that's anybody who had never had any COVID anything introduced to their body ever.
Okay.
That big line. And then all of the little dashed lines
at the bottom,
at the
squished
bottom,
together.
One of them is vaccinated, no previous COVID-19 diagnosis. So they had some immunity just by virtue of having the vaccine.
And
right?
this line is actually higher than the other lines. And the other lines are?
And the other lines are unvaccinated with a previous COVID-19 diagnosis, which isn't the lowest line, but it's pretty low.
Right.
And then the last line, which is the lowest slope, is vaccinated, previous COVID-19 diagnosis. So they had double whammy immunity.
Right.
So you got no whammy immunity, one whammy immunity twice, and then double whammy immunity.
Right.
But so the none are the ones that are hospitalized, which kind of makes sense because if you hadn't been exposed at all, you had nothing in your system to help you fend it off.
Right.
It also there are no caveats for like comorbidities.
Right.
Weight. They do break down by age, but it's a pretty predictable, like, 50 plus.
Rates go up as you go
exactly.
up in age.
And so this graph is directly from that CDC study that I pulled.
Okay.
So then they go on to say, and while research has shown that infection can train the immune system to guard against the coronavirus in different ways than vaccination, COVID-19 also has killed more than 850,000 people in this country, sickened, often severely, millions more, and caused untold cases of long COVID. Serious side effects from the COVID-19 vaccine are extremely rare, which I don't think we can say that definitively.
Right. Well, somebody made a good point. So Dr. Fauci and Rochelle Walensky were testifying about the VAERS data, and a senator or a representative, I don't remember, asked them, is this VAERS data reliable? Do you think that, are there problems with this data? Do you think it's being undercounted, overcounted? And they basically said, Dr. Fauci said, well, if you get hit by a car, like in his stupid voice, if you get hit by a car and you have COVID, that will count as a COVID, or that will count as a vaccine. Sorry, if you get hit by a car after being vaccinated, that could be entered into the VAERS database. And he used that as a basis to discredit the entire VAERS database.
Yeah.
But then somebody on Twitter made a good point. It's like, well, wait a minute. So the CDC can't tell us exactly how many people are dying from the vaccination. And they're also dismissing the only database that we have for even coming close to measuring that. So the only takeaway you have is that they aren't measuring at all the side effects from the vaccine. And so this claim, I fact-checked this false. Or no, I fact-checked this missing context.
Okay, there you go. Well, and I think my understanding of actually entering in a report to VAERS is very difficult and it's very time consuming. Yeah. It takes like almost an hour to do one report. And yes, normal people can do it, but you have to have doctor's notes and you have to have like proof of problem from your doctor. So it's not like crazy people are just going in and entering whatever data they want and making shit up. Like, it's harder to do than that. There are safeguards in place. So, you still have to get stuff from your doctor to actually input your adverse event into the system. So people like to say, well, it's self-reporting. It's like, Technically, yes, but it's really difficult as your average Joe
also,
to do it.
It's self-reporting. That's such a terrible phrase to say to begin with, because when you rolled out a treatment to millions of people, how else are you supposed to gather data? Do you want to send government agents to your door every day to knock on and say, hey, are you experiencing any side effects today?
Yeah.
Or does the system have to be self-reported?
Right.
Like, you either collect no data or you collect potentially unreliable some data.
And the really crazy part, too, is that in clinical trial studies, a lot of the symptoms are self-reported by the people who are trying the new drug. So to discredit anything as self-reporting, then we need to throw away a lot of studies.
Right.
Because you can't always get information by just doing blood work or doing physicals on people. Like, sometimes you need to know what they're feeling, like if there's mind fog, if they feel like their heart is racing. Like, you're not necessarily going to know that just based on observing and taking measurements from different tools.
Right.
So the whole idea that self-reporting is not sufficient for data collection is just ridiculous.
And then here's the case of long COVID. Well, what is long COVID? That's a self-reported thing.
Yes.
No doctor can look at you and be like, you have long COVID. I mean, maybe if you have like permanent lung damage, but that's a very special case.
Right.
But if you're just like, I feel fatigued, or I still don't have my sense of taste and smell, that's all self-reported. Are we going to dismiss that too?
Right.
Are we going to say, well, long COVID's not really a thing because it's self-reported and a lot of people can just be like hypochondriacs?
I mean, that's probably true.
I mean, I think that's true.
I think that's really true.
But it's like
Fact check
the
true.
logic that they're using to dismiss COVID vaccines not having side effects because the VAERS data is unreliable is the same exact logic you can use to dismiss reports of long COVID.
Exactly.
Which basically nullifies all the fear-mongering they're trying to do in this article.
Well, and this article, too, is only talking about hospitalizations. They make no claims about deaths. Right. So that just goes to show you, too.
Well, 850,000 people, but yeah, they're just in their chart, they're only showing hospitalizations.
Yes, and they're only talking about the immune system's ability to, what they say, guard against coronavirus. I love how they say in different ways. And it's like, well, yes, it's in different ways because of the way that the vaccine has been developed. It doesn't utilize your immune system in the traditional way that like the polio vaccine does. So, of course, it's going to be different. But in my own opinion, it's better.
Right. Well,
because why are you messing with a good thing? If it ain't broke, don't fix it.
Right.
My immune system is doing just fine.
If you're going to survive a bout with COVID, then let your immune system handle it. Like, there's no reason not to.
I've literally never been scared of this disease except when we first heard about it in March of 2020. Because they were trying to make it seem like everyone and their mother was going to die from this.
Right.
I thought it was going to be a V for Vendetta, St. Mary's Hospital situation.
Yeah.
I thought children are going to be coughing up blood and falling sick within 3 days and dying. I literally thought that's what was going to happen. And then when more data came out, I was like, okay, I'm probably not going to die from this. I'll just go about my life. And I even had a friend in school who was studying biology, and she was like, I really looked into this. I looked into SARS-CoV-2. I looked into its makeup. It's a flu.
Yeah.
But now I know that she's really liberal, so I'm pretty sure she's like vaccinated and stuff. And I'm like, you called this from the beginning that it was the flu.
Okay,
and
people
you're just
get vaccinated for the flu all the time for no reason.
Yeah, that's true.
And then the other thing I want to say about this specific section is this 850,000 people being killed by COVID number is dishonest anyway, because I want to see what the breakdown is. How many of those people would have died within 1 year anyway, right? If the CDC can't tell me the number of people who were going to die within a year of their supposed COVID death anyway, then that number means nothing. Yeah. Because this could be 500,000 of those people could have been terminally ill cancer patients.
Well, and they probably were. But that reminds me of something I wanted to say about when you were talking about Fauci, and Fauci saying the VAERS isn't necessarily valid because if you get into a car accident and die and you had just had a vaccine, you can report that as like a vaccine injury. But they do that with COVID cases and COVID deaths.
Yeah, if you show up at the hospital with a broken leg, test positive.
But they admitted this, right? They said if you come, because that was the whole with or from COVID thing that was recent. If you, and some of the most heinous examples were like a man was decapitated in a motorcycle accident and they posthumously tested him for COVID. Thank you. You just said it 19 times. We're talking about
this topic.
They tested him for COVID and he was positive, but it's like COVID didn't kill him. the decapitation did, but they still wrote him down as a COVID death.
Right.
And
well, you don't even need to use that extreme example.
No,
right?
you don't. But it's like that number's probably not accurate. And the excuse that Dr. Fauci was using is the exact excuse that they used to justify the number of deaths that they've been reporting. So it's just interesting.
The 850,000 number is also dishonest because, that number is used to determine the infection fatality rate, which is based on the total number of cases and the total number of deaths. But again, the problem is that you have millions upon millions of people who are getting infected with COVID and never getting a test.
Yeah.
The fact that they have COVID never gets entered officially into a system. Yep. And so the infection fatality rate has to be exceedingly low. Like even if COVID had the infection fatality rate of the flu, which it probably does, I would guess, the fact that it's more contagious and infects more total people every year is just going to kill a higher total amount of people. It's not any more deadly than the flu.
Maybe. I mean, it could be more infectious and less virulent though, too.
Well, that's what I'm saying. It could be that, but if it infects more people,
just by virtue, it's going to kill more people.
If one person gets infected with the flu, that person's not likely to die. You could say the flu has a 0% infection fatality rate.
Right.
But if a million people get infected with COVID, well, some handful of those people are going to die. And you could say, well, it's 30,000 times deadlier than the flu. Well, that might be true, but it's just because it's infecting a total number of people that's greater. So it's like, it's dishonest any way you say. And this is the thing that grinds my goat about this, okay? Is that they're using these baseline, they're just using these numbers and they're not adding any additional context. They're not giving you any here's the people that were overweight, here's the people that were going to die within a year anyway, here's the people that are tested that were hospitalized for something unrelated to COVID. They don't do that breakdown. They just give you the total number and use that to scare you.
Well, and Walensky admitted that most people who died from COVID had 4 or 5 other comorbidities and that they probably would have died anyway. And I think somebody had asked her, like an anchor on CNN or something, like, do we know the breakdown of how many people those are? And she was just like, no. I'm like, don't you think that would have been valuable to keep track of? If this is something that you're actually nervous about or scared about and you want to collect data on, wouldn't you be trying to figure out trends as best to your ability as possible? Like, wouldn't you want the highest amount of breakdowns of demographics as possible to know who it exactly kills so you could treat them and prevent it for those people? They just don't care. They don't care enough.
That sounds like what a reasonable public health expert would do, and that's why we don't have...
That sounds like what an actual medical doctor would do.
Right, and that's why we don't have reasonable...
Maybe I should go into public health.
Yeah.
I'm smarter than this people.
Yeah, well, I think most people are smarter than... Well, it's not a matter of... I don't know if it's a matter of being smart. It's just that these people have other interests.
That's true.
They're not... They're politically motivated. They're financially motivated. And that's basically it. I mean, their last motivation, their last priority is actually conducting good public health policy. Their first priority is how much money can we line into Pfizer's pockets?
Which leads into this nicely. The very last line of this article is a quote. We know that vaccination remains the safest strategy for protecting against COVID-19, Benjamin Silk, a CDC epidemiologist, told reporters Wednesday.
CDC epidemiologist might as well be the same title as garbage inspector.
But also, I reject that we know that it's the safest strategy, because we don't.
Right.
Because it's a new vaccine. It's a new disease. We don't have any data. You're claiming things like long COVID without having long-term studies. So we don't know.
Right.
We don't know. I reject it. I reject the whole notion that we know anything about this.
And also, the context has shifted. Maybe, and we don't know, but maybe this could be true with the Alpha or Delta variant. We're not on the Omicron, which is basically killing nobody.
Yeah.
So if Omicron kills 0 people and a vaccine kills 1 person, it's not the safest strategy anymore.
Correct.
So this is like, these people are so dishonest.
They just can't admit that they were wrong, or that they can't admit that things have changed and what was the best solution is no longer the best solution. And it's like, I'm so sick of you telling me what is safe for me. Let me just put whatever I want in my body and don't tell me that I have to do something. Like, I don't want it. I don't trust Big Pharma. I haven't for a long time. And I don't want to put your weird shit in my arm.
Right.
I'm sorry. I don't. Actually, I'm not sorry.
We should let's cap off the COVID discussion with this. So this is a tweet, and it's really heartbreaking. Actually, this is from a teacher. Supposedly, this person says, "A student in my 1st grade class wrote this today. I never want to hear how kids are resilient again." And it's this drawing, and the kid writes underneath, "I have a dream to have COVID be over."
Oh.
First graders saying this.
I don't know about you, but the image on the left of the line looks creepy.
Yeah, that is very creepy.
Demonic. And I know like kids aren't the best drawers, but just the way that the lines are coming out, it looks
and the
like
mouth. Is that a mouth? Like
I think
the big
it's a mask.
hole?
No, I think it's a mask.
Oh, it's a mask.
But
yeah.
it looks like a creepy, like it looks like the other mother from Coraline when she turns into the spider creature.
Yeah.
That's what this looks like.
Yeah.
That's
so are
the
these
thing
like
of
the mask strings coming out then
I
here?
think so. Well,
and
I
then
think
it's pointing to the have a dream for COVID to be over.
it's either that or it's like a really deformed stick figure.
Mm.
But it's disturbing. And even the eyes don't look happy.
Yeah.
Like the eyes and the smiley face look much happier.
Right.
It's so sad
That
and
is
creepy.
very sad.
Like this kid is probably having nightmares.
Yeah.
Like he probably just drew his nightmare image.
Right. And I wanted to use this as a jumping off point to address the kids are resilient point because you've heard this from left-wing people.
They aren't.
They're not resilient. They're
they
not.
aren't.
That's the entire purpose of shielding them from all of the adult worries. That's the entire purpose for containing them in a little bubble of blissful ignorance while they're young children is because they cannot handle the realities of the world. They cannot handle financial stress.
No.
They can't handle pandemic stress. They are supposed to be insulated. As a society, we're supposed to protect them from all the horrors of the world.
Yeah.
You know why? Because that's the only period in time where you're ever going to experience true blissful ignorance.
True.
And we protect that and we let them develop in that little bubble because they don't need to worry about that. They just need to have a great time growing up, learning, being with their family.
Yeah.
And we as a society are burdening them with this ridiculous garbage.
Well, we're burdening them, but we're also ruining an entire generation of people, a couple generations of people, because they are worried about adult worries and they're becoming so broken that when they become adults, our entire world is going to collapse because they're not going to know how to manage and function properly because they haven't been insulated because I think I'm not a parent, but I think as a parent, you have to kind of weigh different stressors and decide which one you're going to introduce to your child and which one you're not, because you do have to kind of start getting them ready for real world problems. But you kind of go, okay, this one is a little stressful, but it's not so much that they're going to have a meltdown and have nightmares for the rest of their life. Right. And then there's other things where you're like, maybe we don't talk about murderers until they're a little bit older.
Or financial issues.
Yeah.
If the dad in the family is having trouble with his jobs, you don't surface that to your young child.
Exactly.
You shield the child from that because they can't do anything about it anyway.
Well, they can't do anything about it, and little kids tend to see things very black and white. And so if dad's upset and he just happens to yell at Johnny because Johnny was like playing or whatever, dad's upset because he's stressed about money, not because Johnny's playing. But if he yells at Johnny while Johnny's playing, Johnny's going to be like, Dad is mad at me. Dad hates me. I'm the reason Dad's upset and stressed. And that is way more trauma than any child ever needs. Like, I hate to use that word because it's
been stolen from us.
So watered down. But it's like the leftists who are saying that kids are resilient are the same people that are saying, you don't know what your childhood trauma is until you go to therapy for 50 years and uncover it. It's like, you are literally creating this trauma that you say you have to uncover.
Right.
You're putting this on your kids, probably because you have your own trauma and don't know how to be a real adult. And so you're making your kids become miniature adults before they're ready and capable of comprehending that stuff.
Yeah. And what happens too when these kids grow up and they become teenagers or young adults and they realize that a huge chunk of their childhood was stolen from them? Is that going to create happy, wonderful people that are determined to do well in life, or is that going to create bitter, resentful people? I mean,
they're going to be hateful.
Not to say that everyone who lives through this time as a child is going to grow up to be bitter and resentful, but I would bet that that's going to create a higher portion of bitter and resentful people when they realize that, oh, wait, my mom was a narcissist and she held me back from doing things as a kid that I should have been doing for something that wasn't a threat to me.
Yeah.
Like that's family destroying stuff. That's life shattering stuff for a lot of people.
And I wonder how much of this could be considered like Munchausen's by proxy.
I think it is, yeah.
Because it's parents who are not in good health, like they're overweight and they are on a million medications and they have all these other problems and they're worried that their kid is going to bring it home and then they'll die. It's the narcissism part of it, you know, but they're treating their kids like they're infectious little cesspools, which Sometimes they are, but
you
in this case,
you deal with
not.
that. You don't make it painfully obvious to the children that they're disgusting, disease-ridden fools.
Like, oh, Johnny, you killed grandma, way to go, because you got COVID at school and then gave her a hug and now she's dead.
Right.
And this is why you need to wear your mask at school. Like, if you're sick, I am sure that somebody's had that conversation.
I'm sure.
Like, grandma got sick because you didn't wear your mask at school and then you went to grandma's house. It's like, what kind of stress is that for a kid? Like, I'm the reason that grandma's sick. Also, grandma's sick because she's old.
Also,
like,
the kids aren't even, in that hypothetical scenario, the kid's not even responsible.
No.
It's the adult's responsibility. If you're worried about your mom, grandma in this situation dying, you tell Johnny, do not visit her. You come here, right? You don't let Johnny make the decision and then blame him when something goes south.
Yeah, you don't blame him for not wearing a mask. It's like, you know that kids don't wash their hands and that they're kind of gross. Don't bring them over
As
to grandma.
the adult, you are responsible. You're responsible for shielding your child from the stressors, unnecessary stresses of the world. You're also responsible for controlling the situation. If your child is doing something that's higher risk, then it's your responsibility to protect the rest of the family, not to cut off the child's childhood and force them to stay in their room doing Zoom school.
Well, and not to get too tangential with this, but I think that speaks to the infantilization of adults too, because there are so many adults that I feel like were ill-equipped to become parents because they were allowed to prolong their adolescence and prolong their childlike whimsy, I guess you could say, and their lack of responsibility, that maybe they had kids before they were ready, before they had the emotional maturity for it, before they were responsible, functioning adults. And so in a way, they're still acting as adolescents and trying to make their kids into the adults instead of the other way around, which is how it's supposed to be. Because you're supposed to be teaching your kids how to be adults, not how to be a kid forever. Yeah. If that makes sense.
Yeah. Yeah, I think
it's just disgusting to see parents sacrificing their kids for their own good.
Yeah, I think it's just this whole thing with, like, children are a case study for the cultural rot that is just spread throughout this nation. Like, the fact that we would sacrifice children at the altar of COVID, so to speak, is absolutely absurd, especially with the data being the data that it is. You cannot make any reasonable decision other than children should have been left to go to school unfettered, not wearing masks, not being vaccinated. That should have been their life should not have changed during COVID at all, period.
Yeah, they can see adults' faces covered in masks, whatever, but they should be able to see their peers.
Yeah, if the teacher wants to wear a mask in class, fine.
If the teacher's that scared, quit, go get another job.
Right.
Sorry. That you do not have the right to work. Sorry.
Especially as a public servant.
Yes. The idea that working is a human right is bullshit. You don't have a right to a job. You don't have a right to an income. That is something that is earned. That is something that you gain a skill to do. It's not a right. If you have no skills, you don't have a job. That's how it is.
And if you don't want to do the job, bye-bye.
Yeah, you don't get to say, well, I feel unsafe in my workplace, so you as the employer need to accommodate. No, you know what you signed up for. If you're not okay with the protocol and the rules set in place, GTFO, goodbye.
GTFO.
You're not welcome here anyway.
Right.
It's just ridiculous that, like you said, 20 plus school children in one classroom are somehow less important than the one adult in the room. Get out of here. That is ridiculous.
And especially in the broader context of really COVID's only killing old people and people with comorbidities. So it's like we're prioritizing old people over children that have been alive for a grand total of 6 years.
I know.
It's like,
they have to live 80 more years on this planet. Grandma got maybe 2.
Yeah.
Like, why are we... And I know our mom said this from the very beginning. She's like, we are protecting our old people at the sacrifice of our children and our young people.
It's backwards.
Like, that is so backwards. No elderly person was like, yeah, kids need to stay home because I don't want to die.
Right.
Like, every old person I've talked to is like, yeah, I don't know why kids aren't going to school.
Yeah.
We used to get chicken pox and everyone in the whole class would get chicken pox together. You know, like, they don't understand. There was even one woman that I talked to who survived polio. And so she's kind of like, I don't know why kids aren't going to school.
Yeah.
Like, I got polio and survived, you know? So it's really upsetting. It's really gross.
It's a cultural rot. It's a total intolerance to any risk, no matter how minuscule it is. Like, I can understand if 1% of all school children were dying. That would be a different scenario, right? Yeah. You have a class of 100 students and one of them's going to die. Okay, that's a different scenario. But kids are not dying at at any sort of rate that should be concerning from this disease at all.
Yeah.
And so it's just like,
and this whole generational rot of our country and society sometimes makes me wish for a war on U.S. soil. Not because I want our countrymen to die or that I want, our monuments destroyed or whatever. Like, I don't want that to happen. But at the same time, people have become so cowardly and they are so fearful of everything.
Yeah.
And they also don't have anything else to worry about, so they worry about stupid shit. Like, the woke ideology has only come about in our society because we're too comfortable. If there was a war on U.S. soil, you better believe nobody cares about your neo pronouns anymore,
right.
because you're probably going to die in the war.
Right.
But that's true. It's like, if we don't have something that catastrophic and major happen to our country or against our country soon, it's going to completely collapse. Well, if we don't have a unifying major event like that.
Well, COVID should have been the unifying major event, and it wasn't.
Because it's not as deadly as everyone thought it was.
I don't see there. I think that would work. I also think just forcing 18-year-olds to make their own life and stop coddling them, stop giving them free money to go to college for whatever they want, stop, letting them stay at home for 10 years until they're 28 years old.
Well, that's a problem with our economy now.
If you want to create strong people, first of all, you should be training your kids to be strong until they're ready to go off on their own. But once they hit 18, make them do their own thing.
Yeah. I mean, that's how we were raised. It's like, if you go to school, fine, but
you're
if
paying
not,
for it.
Well, one, you're paying for it, but if you don't go, when you turn 18 and you graduate high school, you're out of my house. Right. I don't care.
Right.
I don't care if you're on the street. I don't care if you have to go live with a friend. Doesn't matter. You're 18. You're an adult. Get out of my house.
Right, and that wasn't because our parents hate us. It's because they knew we were strong enough to do that.
Well, and our parents also joined the Navy when they were 18. And were effectively adults that could die for our country when they were 18. So
they went
there
off
was no
to
coddling
foreign
of
nations,
them.
sailing seas at 18, and you have
no one
people
coddled them.
Yeah, you have people that are 18 now that can barely do laundry.
Exactly. There was no coddling them, so they didn't coddle us. And unfortunately, I don't think most of our peers can say that.
Yeah. So it's just people just need adversity, and everything about this culture at every turn is about removing adversity, especially in the woke case. Like, okay, I could be convinced that there are some unique challenges that Black individuals face. I could be convinced across a variety of different areas. But the answer is not to coddle them.
No.
The answer is not to remove each and every single barrier from just society as a whole. Yes, remove the unjust barriers. That makes sense. Barriers that only exist because they're Black.
Yeah.
But removing barriers generally, like test scores because they're Black,
or grades,
you are making people weaker by not giving them any challenge.
And lowering the literacy quality qualifiers or whatever.
That's not making a strong country. That's not making strong Black individuals. That's not making strong white individuals. That's weakening everyone.
Yeah, I don't know when this happened, but the emphasis went from building strength and fortitude to let's air your traumas, and it's okay to live in your traumas. And it's like, why? If you want to be perpetually weak, go ahead and live in your traumas. Like, okay, work through them. Don't bury them because it's going to cause other problems for you. But at the same time, if you're constantly living in your traumas, so to speak, because everyone nowadays is traumatized, it's like, no, maybe at some point you just experienced a difficult time, and instead of learning from it, you decided to become a victim from it. And it's like, one learning from it makes you stronger, and the other makes you weak and perpetually stuck in a cycle of re-traumatization. So they say.
Right.
So it's like, just get over it.
And
I don't know. Nobody wants to hear you whine, and nobody wants to hear you cry. I'm sorry.
Right.
Get over your trauma. We've all been through shit. Get over it.
And that's just, it's a mental trap too, because, everything that I've done, I have a variety of interests that I've pursued, and everything I've done is because I know that I can do it. It wasn't like, oh, I'm not a good artist, or I'm not good at math, or I'm like, no, some things are going to take more work, but I'm going to do it because I know I can. I just need to spend the time doing it. That's a mental state. That's a mental framing. I have a framing, however egotistical it is, that I can do anything if I spend enough time on it. Now, regardless if that works out for me, I'm still developing all these skills, becoming stronger, becoming more well-rounded. Somebody that has the frame of mind that they can't do anything because they're weak or because they're traumatized aren't going to do anything with their lives. They're not going to be useful. They're not going to grow. And so I understand you might have a crippling trauma. I understand that. But dwelling on it and embracing it and using it as a crutch to get away from doing difficult things is just going to keep you a weak, pathetic pile of garbage.
Yep.
That's all it's going to do. So, you know.
And it can't be fun to live like that either.
It can't be.
Like, I mean, do you want to think about the worst moment you ever experienced in your entire life? Do you want to relive that every day and think about it every day?
Nope. And I also don't want to tell people about it either.
No, it's not, because it's not, one, it's not important to how you treat other people and how you interact with other people. Yes, it did form who you are in a manner of speaking, but it's like, it's not important to anybody but you.
Right.
It just isn't. And nobody wants to hear about it, probably.
Maybe a close friend, maybe your therapist.
Close friend, maybe a girlfriend or a boyfriend or, a spouse or whatever. But it's like, nobody cares. Sorry. Right. Nobody cares. You have to figure out a way to spin things in a positive way and get over them. Because otherwise you end up with kids drawing nightmare spider people. And they're traumatized in a way that they can't comprehend and can't become strong from, because the trauma is being caused by the adults they trust in their life. And it's never going to get worked out because the adults in their life are never going to recognize it as trauma. And they're never going to help them understand what happened so that they can grow from it. Because their parents are weak people who can't help them.
And imagine being the parent that when you realize, or you may never come to this realization because you don't want to, realize that you were the cause of your child's trauma.
Yeah.
You're not gonna touch that with a 10-foot pole. Like you're gonna shovel that back. You will never accept that truth that you were the one that traumatized your child.
And you're gonna be that parent that never talks to their kid and never sees their kid because the kid is like, I hate you.
Right.
Goodbye.
It's just like, think about what you're doing, people. Right?
Yeah, they're just, like you said, they're just so narcissistic and so in their own world that even though they have this gift of a little human that they should be cherishing and protecting and loving and should be the only thing on their minds ever, they can't, because they're so narcissistic. They don't even think about this innocent little thing that you could literally throw across the room. Like they don't view their kids as things to be protected. They're like accessories.
Yeah.
Not people. And it's really gross.
It is gross. Do you want to talk about this Theodore Roosevelt statue?
Speaking of gross.
Yeah, this is a gross one as well.
Just to make you hate our country more.
Yeah, already
it's not
there.
Our country, it's our culture.
Yeah.
I hate our culture. It's disgusting. So this is in the New York Post on January 19th. Theodore Roosevelt statue removed from American Museum of Natural History. And you probably heard that this was going to happen, but this actually just happened at midnight on January 19th. So this is the statue. It's very beautiful.
It is a beautiful statue.
It's very large.
Is it bronze?
It is bronze. Yeah. Oh, no, it might be...
maybe
might
not.
be copper.
Okay, anyway.
But regardless, bronze or copper, it's a beautiful statue.
It is beautiful.
I mean, there's a lot of detail. They got the muscular shape of the horse really spot on. I mean, it's just beautiful.
Mm-hmm.
Anyway, and then there's another picture of it.
So this is it getting hauled off?
That's it leaving. So they took Roosevelt off first and then removed the horse and the other two guys.
Just a tangent. I've never thought about this, but those statues, the pedestals, they're not like bolted to the pedestals. They just sit on top because they're so heavy.
Yeah.
I've never thought about that's why you can topple statues, is because they're not bolted to their base. Yeah, you get enough
manpower behind it. Yeah.
Right.
Because the wind's not going to knock it down.
Yeah, they're so heavy that they don't move, so you don't need to bolt it.
But
anyway,
this one might have been bolted, though, because it took them a long time to remove it.
Oh,
so
okay.
I don't know if it was just the removal process was difficult because they had to take Roosevelt off first, or if they actually did have to unbolt it.
I see. Okay.
I think there's high winds in New York.
But that wouldn't blow over a statue like that of solid metal.
Maybe.
Anyway.
I don't know. So the very first line of this article, Roosevelt went on a rough ride.
Nice.
That was very classy. A statue of Theodore Roosevelt that has stood in front of the American Museum of Natural History in Manhattan for more than 80 years was hauled away Wednesday. It is bronze. The bronze monument depicting the nation's 26th president on a horse, flanked by an African man and a Native American man, which has sparked protests for glorifying colonialism and racism, am I right, was yanked out with a crane just after midnight, leaving behind only its concrete pedestal.
Okay, so first of all, so the problem here, so this was 80 years ago, right? So that would have been what? The 1940s?
Sure.
So
don't make me do math.
The 1940s was not
Yeah.
exactly a racially harmonious era.
No.
Right? So to have a statue of a president alongside a prominent statue at a museum of a former American president alongside racially and culturally diverse people, I would think for the time that it was made, the 1940s, that would have been a very progressive statue.
And also, I don't look at this statue and go, oh, Roosevelt thinks he's better than these other
Right.
guys.
The statue looks almost cooperative, like they have banded together. Like, okay, he's above the rest of them because he's on a horse, but he's also a president.
Right. The significance isn't that he was a white man. The significance was that he was the leader of the people.
Right.
And the people, and it was actually inclusive because it wasn't just that the people that he was leading were white people. It was also African Americans and Native Americans.
Yeah.
And also, there wasn't a picture of the side with the African man, I don't think, but the side with the Native American man, he's like helping Roosevelt on the horse.
Yeah. And
like
also,
he's like holding on to him.
Also, the Native American man looks absolutely jacked.
He does.
Yeah.
Like, what's offensive about this? That he's wearing culturally appropriate
He looks
garb?
he looks amazing, honestly, with the headdress.
He looks very masculine.
Yeah.
Like, I wouldn't mess with this guy.
He looks masculine, regal, like
the shoes look accurate. Like, he looks very stoic.
All the kind of traits that you would ascribe to a king is like what is embodied in the Native American man here.
I don't look at this and go, oh my gosh, that Native American man is cowering because he's scared of Roosevelt.
No, yeah.
That's not what this... Look how, like, he's standing tall. His shoulders are...
Right. It is a triumphant, heroic statue all across the board. Not just Teddy Roosevelt, but I can't see the African man. But
I didn't see any pictures of what that side looked like, but... To say that it's colonialism and racism is just ridiculous. I think the statue was more so to represent cohesion in America.
Right.
Like, I think that was what its goal was. And I'm sure critics at the time were upset that there were men other than white men depicted in it.
I'm sure, yeah.
40s. I can imagine.
Yeah.
I can imagine some people would have been angry.
Right.
Yeah, so... I reject that. The controversial effigy, I reject that, will be sent to a library in North Dakota on a long-term loan, officials have said, which I believe the library is like Roosevelt. Oh yeah.
Presidential library?
It does say that. So it was a $2 million removal, which the city paid for. And the New York City Public Design Commission voted in June to relocate the monument. Last month, the museum covered the 10-foot tall statue with an orange tarp, which is so disrespectful, ahead of its shipment to the Theodore Roosevelt Presidential Library in Medora, North Dakota. So it's a Teddy Roosevelt library, which maybe that is the most appropriate place for it, but you're talking about the museum for American history.
Right.
Like
one of the most influential presidents of American history.
Yeah, it's just upsetting.
It is upsetting.
And then, freaking wokists. They never disappoint, do they?
Right.
One of the ex-president's descendants, Theodore Roosevelt V, cheered the removal plan last year, saying it's, quote, fitting that the statue is being relocated to a place where its composition can be recontextualized to facilitate difficult, complex, and inclusive discussions. Your predecessor is rolling over in his grave right now and wants to disown you, Theodore Roosevelt V.
Right.
Get out of here.
That's
disgusting.
First of all, you're a descendant many times generationally removed. You cannot speak for your ancestors. Exactly. That can't happen. So this guy should basically be regarded as nothing more than just a random dude. But here's the thing that's really disgusting too. It's like, if you want the discussion to be recontextualized, if you want to go on your woke like tirades about how this statue is problematic and whatsoever, why can't you do that while it's sitting out front of the American History Museum?
Wouldn't that be the best place for it?
Right. Why can't you stand there and quote unquote educate people? Like, it's still a free speech issue. I don't agree with what they're saying, but isn't the best place to bring light to whatever issues you have with the statue at the place where it is?
Also, in a place like Manhattan where millions of people walk by it every day.
Right.
Moving it to some obscure library in North Dakota in a town that most people have never heard of is not going to help that. Because nobody's going to go to that library specifically to see the statue.
Yeah.
The point of putting it where it was so that millions of people could see it daily.
Right. Well,
that's the point.
I don't know if millions see it daily, but millions a year for sure.
I don't know. There's millions of people that live in New York City.
Yeah, but not everyone's passing by the statue.
Okay, well, fine. But still, I mean, it's a highly trafficked place.
Right.
Manhattan is heavily populated. I'm sure the museum is on somebody's route to work or home or something.
Right.
Some people probably see it every day, and now it's going to be gone.
Right.
Nobody can talk about it now because it's going to be, again, in an obscure library that is probably a really cool library, but it's all the way in North Dakota.
Well, here's the thing, though. Here's the thing. So you have, obviously, the left's animus towards varying statues.
Yes.
So if the choice is between they're going to deface the statue or it gets moved to North Dakota where there are no radicals that are going to topple it, I'd rather move it to North Dakota.
Yeah, I agree.
But I wonder if there's an opportunity here for the red state governors like DeSantis to get their hands on some of these statues that are being removed. Like, for these governors to step up and say, we are going to preserve our heritage. We're going to preserve our statue. Because this is not just a statue, right?
Yeah.
It's an 80 years old. Admittedly, it's not terribly old, but it's a beautifully done statue with some age behind it that was built in an era where racial segregation was still the norm, that depicts a multiracial group of men engaged in heroic postures and all this stuff. It's a reminder of what the United States was like at the time, of what Theodore Roosevelt was like, of the struggles of the Native Americans and Africans. And it's also just like a marker to say, well, this was made in a time where we weren't as progressive as we are now with the racial desegregation and all this stuff that the woke want to resegregate. But, it's like it is a part of our heritage. It's a part of our short history, this statue, right? And it's like, how can you just remove it's part of the the cultural, I guess, Marxism, you could say. It's a removal of the idols of the society, the markers of our progress.
Well, statues are so interesting, right? Because they are markers of progress. Like, you can almost map them out on a linear timeline, right? And say, like, this is what was happening when this was built. This is what was happening when this was built. Yeah. This was built to commemorate this thing that happened X amount of years ago. Like, it's a really good way to blueprint history, right? Like, it's a good way to remember what happened and when. Right. But if you remove all of that, you're trying to recontextualize something by removing it from its context. It doesn't make any sense. There was a reason it was put in New York City, Manhattan, in the 1940s. Why don't you figure out what that context was and go from there? If you're trying to recontextualize something, figure out why the statue was commissioned to begin with. Right. And also recontextualization kind of sounds like a propaganda word I think it is a propaganda word. Rewrite history. Exactly. But I think I like the idea of a red state governor getting their hands on a lot of these statues, because as soon as you said that, I pictured like a big hedge maze where in each alcove was like a different one of the monuments and with an actual plaque that gives you the context of why it was built, where it was originally built, what it represents, when it was built, what it represents, and why it was removed. Yeah. I think adding that last part of why it was removed is going to be really important for future generations looking at our history. Like, there was a statue here for 100 years, and then they took it down. Why did they take it down? So that would be a really cool project, I think. It would. Yeah, it would. I don't know how doable that is, but idea for red state governors, I guess. It said that that statue was loaned to North Dakota, so I guess... long-term loan, though. Yeah, I guess it's like they still own it, so they get to dictate where the statue goes. Yeah. But if somehow these red state governors could, like, outright, earn or buy the statues, it might be a good idea. I like it. I like that they moved it better than... What was the statue that they said they were going to, like, melt down? Oh, I don't remember. But yeah, I remember that being a thing in the news. I don't remember what the statue was. Yeah, I don't remember. It was one of the southern statues, but that was really gross. I think your cat is screaming. Yes. So, yes. This goes on to say some critics called the relocation a victory for cancel culture and a blow to history. I love how they just throw that in there like it's no big deal. It's so flippant.
Well, what about the fact that it's a blow to art, too? Like, you're taking this beautiful thing, like, even stripping away the historical context. It is a beautiful statue.
Yeah, it is.
And it's being removed from a shared public space where Americans can feel proud that they had some small part in creating that statue.
Yeah.
Being totally removed and basically shifted under the rug, swept under the rug where no one is going to see it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And of course, the statue came under fire amid a nationwide Black Lives Matter protest sparked by the police killing of George Floyd in May 2020.
Of course.
Which we can't say is a false statement because he was convicted.
That's true.
The police officer was convicted. So that's my last ridiculous, sad story.
Yeah, that was...
It's just depressing.
It is.
Goes back to what we were talking about. The ugliness just persists. It's like, not only are we not building new things that are beautiful, we're taking down and removing the already beautiful things.
Right.
So it's like, what's the point?
Well, that was kind of a downer, so I'm just going to end really quick on this last one. So this is a good thing.
Okay.
I mean, I'm going to give Biden credit where it's due. So the White House released this statement, and essentially, it's up on the screen if you want to read it, but essentially, Intel announced a plan for a $20 billion plant in Ohio as part of President Biden's push for more domestic semiconductor production. So Biden and Intel jointly announced this $20 billion plant going right in the Midwest in Ohio. And this is a good step towards reshoring our semiconductor manufacturing, which is a huge national security risk because we can't get any advanced chips from anywhere other than overseas. So anyway, I just wanted to mention that Joe Biden finally did something good here. Now, I want to be cautious of giving him all the credit because I don't know how much of this was in motion when Donald Trump was president.
True.
Like, did Biden pick it up at the 80% mark and take it to the finish line?
Well, I wonder how much it's more so it's Governor DeWine, and not so much presidential, but
I mean, Intel obviously saw it fit to do the announcement jointly with President Biden. So anyway, that's a good thing.
That is really good.
We need more of this. If Joe Biden keeps doing some of this, he won't be totally useless. And whoever the 2024 nominee is for the Republicans better double down on things of this nature.
3,000 new jobs in the Midwest is really good.
Yeah.
That's
absolutely.
Very good.
And it's $20 billion. I mean, that's going to be for construction companies, for all kinds of things, right? So
that's true. Yeah, because the plant itself will create 3,000 new jobs, but you're going to be employing a lot of people just in its construction, right? So, and there is no shortage of construction companies in the Midwest. So that's gonna be good for the economy too.
Cool. Well, I think that's awesome. It for this episode. Thanks for joining us in the clown world again. Once again, I'm Jacob.
And I'm Sadie.
And we'll see you in the next one. Be sure to follow us. All of the links are in the description wherever you're listening or watching.
Yes. Stay sane, friends.